Hey you, Caucasian.
Caveman,
Hey, Blanco,
Gringo,
Paleface.
I gotta tell you a secret.
Gruni, Hunk, Mzungu.
This might come as a surprise, but
White people, listen to this. In America in the early 1600s, you didn't exist. I hate to break it to you like this. Listen to what your history books missed. What would be made white were completely unrelated, under-melanated people. Frankenstein, collaged by an optical illusion. The ultimate mirage called race. A social construction like Santa Claus. Back in the day, y'all either English or Scot, Irish Catholic or Protestant, land owning or not. But you can't have white without black in America. Back before we was Captain America, black wasn't a race. Africans came from different nations, like in Ndongo, where Queen Nzinga reigned. Indigenous were the same, Powhatan, Doag, regardless of tribe, melanin didn't determine fate. Skin color didn't make a difference, no matter what hue your flesh was tinted in, cause your complexion wasn't kinship, and pigment was insignificant. It didn't prevent you from certain privileges. This is the story of how skin became color, color became race, and race became power. The creation of the Caucasian, white Aryan. It's the story of how white became American.
The census says your race is white, don't believe the hype.
1650, Jamestown. Meet William Berkeley, appointed by King Charles II of England to govern colonial Virginia. He rules with an iron hand and enriches a small cadre of English landowners. They grow tobacco. The sweet leaf is gold. America's first road to riches. Yeah. Hey, to grow the crop, they kidnap and capture men, engaged in human trafficking and trap the African. And if they can't steal the labor, then they use lies as lures, or false promises as tools to recruit all the poor from Bristol to Liverpool. Little did they know that they were in for something cruel. Jamestown was their destination. When Berkeley looks at his servants, what does he see? Color, of course, but color doesn't mean much to a man of means.
They're heathens, waste, dirty, diseased, lazy animals. I would sooner call my hound brother than a servant of any shade.
Under God and by law, he has the right to whip, maim, starve, buy, or sell them at his pleasure. But he fears them. He should. The rich are few, and the poor are many. It's almost impossible to imagine now, but the poor see themselves as one. They have a common bond and a common enemy. Together. 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 The Africans and English worked together. They labored and lived, prayed and made a life together. Stole, escaped, hold and wait together. They got lashed and went to jail together. Worked hard and catch hell together. It wasn't criminal for them to love together. Got married and had kids together. The colony was filled with different shades together. Mahogany, tan, olive, and beige together. Molasses, dark chocolatey flavors together. Peach, bronze, amber, and brown. But very soon life would change up in Jamestown. There's no lifetime slavery yet. The indentured Europeans and Africans can still buy their freedom. Released from bondage, they'd set out in search of land. For these new frontiersmen, freedom is a rotten promise. The rich own all the good soil, and the indigenous tribes desperately grasp for the rest, fighting for every acre they have left. The frontiersmen seethe with each new tax, each broken promise, each death, each rich man that grows richer, each poor man that grows poorer, until they can't take it anymore. 1676, time to take matters into their own hands. They cast one Nathaniel Bacon as leader, the son of an aristocrat who came to the frontier after squandering his inheritance. Under Bacon, they band together to take land from the tribes and power from Berkeley.
Together. Together. Together.
Get your guns, get your knives. First target is the tribes. Kill the men, women, and the children. And the children. 100 men turned into 1,000. A posse-turned guerrilla army is astounding. And Dongo, English, Angolan, Irish fought together to abolish all the tyrants and the snakes, ready to mount the heads on stakes. Enough of these rich men, of these false men, corrupt men. Light the torches and set Jamestown ablaze. Let it burn, let it burn. Jamestown put the ashes in an urn. 100 years before the revolution, Africans and Europeans were in union. Let it burn, let it burn. The British never wanted us to earn. So bring the fire to the upper classes. We can make a better future from the ashes. Berkeley watches Jamestown burn, and he burns with vengeance.
The waste must be cleansed from God's green earth.
Behind a British gunship, retribution. Berkeley hangs 20 and scatters the rest into the wilderness. The rich of Jamestown know it could have been their own necks hanging from the end of a poor man's noose. To survive as rich men, as powerful men, they vow never to let the poor rise up again as one. But how? What scheme? What deception? In 1681, white will appear in a legal document for the first time in history when Virginia bans Africans from marrying whites. One law of dozens creating and separating the races. Blacks across the colonies will be enslaved for life, no longer treated as human, but as property. Poor whites were handed the whip. The rich exploited their ignorance. They traded rebellious plots for managing slave auction blocks, and any chance for both of their freedom was lost. It doesn't happen overnight, but the rich divided people by phenotype. Melanin, skin color, you dark, you light. Your life or death could be determined by the question, are you white? Well, are you white? Go ahead. Take a look in the mirror. Ask yourself, am I white?
So I want to cover something about genocide. There's a lot of different levels to this genocide, but genocide is genocide. It doesn't matter if it came through blankets, somebody deliberately spreading diseases. Back in the colonial era or pre-colonial era, you know, they brought diseases. Some of these diseases was spread without intentionally spreading them. But on the flip side, some of these diseases was used as biological warfare. They were spread on purpose. They knew that it would be devastating. They were afraid of these diseases in Europe, running away from it. They was running away from the bubonic plague and all these other things over there. It decimated populations in Europe. They knew exactly what it would do here. They can kill hundreds, thousands without them losing any man in war, losing any woman without any bloodshed. They can reduce populations. But see, a part of the narrative of extincting the indigenous populations and making us look smaller than what we are is through the misclassification because now you just wiped out part of a population of people just with the pen. But then you say it's because of the disease. The disease killed a lot of us. The reclassification killed the rest and left a fraction of people classified as American Indians in the United States, making the American Indian population, only reducing it to only a fraction of the United States populace. So there's a lot of manipulation, a lot of lies, a lot of intentional lies to make the American Indian population look like it's almost non-existent, which is why on CNN they said other when it came to voting. Didn't even give us a name. And why there's not really a political strong arm representing the American Indian when you compare to other populations like the Mexican American and African American and so forth. And that's a problem in itself. Why does everyone have an adjective attached to American except for people of European descent? They're just American. The ones who should have been just American, I mean, if there's a reclassification to accept, First Nations people should be the ones who are just called Americans. Everyone else, if you are of African descent, then an African American. If you are of Mexican descent, Mexican American. If you are of Spanish from Spain, Spanish American. If you're from Ireland, Irish American, not just American. See, you see just in these labels, these misnomers and classifications, something is wrong. Just even talking about white and talking about black and the way that most people view these colors. That's all it is a color. The way everybody views these things is wrong. When you associate yourself, I'm a color, then something is wrong with that picture. You just promoted yourself as a color over who you really are. For myself, somebody asked me, who are you? What are you? Well, first of all, I'm a human. I'm a human being. I'm real people. I'm the first people. I'm a real human being. So if I was to answer someone's question, who are you? What are you? So again, I am the real people. That's, you're going to hear this throughout Turtle Island. In whatever nation's language, you're going to hear them say they're the real people. They are the principal people. They are the first people. The Apache, the Aniumia, the Skarude, and on and on and on, in their own languages, are going to say they're the real people, the first people, the principal people. They're not going to say, I'm the black people, I'm the red people, I'm the white people, I'm the green, blue, yellow, pink people. A color doesn't make sense. So how did this color start? Why is everybody identifying as a color? It is because it was designed to extinct a certain demographic and to uplift another. People identified as African Americans proudly hold on to the misnomer black. Now, I'm gonna give credit to where credit is due, definitely due. Norris Turtle Gang, when he first mentioned that black is a culture and experience, that piqued my interest when he said that. I took that, ran with it, tried to internalize it, make sense out of it, expand on it, and it just makes so much sense. I'm glad he put that seed out there for it to grow. And as we put it out there, it will continue to grow to bring balance to your thinking on how we've been purposely manipulated. Our thinking has been manipulated, and our intellect is toyed with. You play with children, not with adults. So if we're being played with, someone is playing with us like we're children. So in law, that means we can take the word child out and substitute ward. Ward of the state, ward of the government. Ward, which means you are incompetent to be able to take care of yourself. So the parent, which is the state or the federal government, has to take care of you because you can't take care of yourself. Let's go back to black. Black is a culture and an experience. And it's a color, right? But this color represents a culture and an experience. Not a race, not a nationality, not an ethnicity. There's not a black language. There's not a black land, black names. That stuff is got everybody going crazy. It's complete chaos. It's unbalanced. Culture. What is black culture? Hip hop. Does only African Americans listen, practice, subscribe to hip hop? No. People on the reservations out west are rappers. Eminem has blonde hair, unless he dyed it blonde, but he's clearly of European descent, but he's a rapper and a good one. So, culture is graffiti, it's hip hop, it's R&B, it's jazz, it's urban clothing, it's cookouts with Big Mama, who's matriarch or clan mother. It's the church. All these things is culture. And there's more than that. Food. Soul food. The food in the Southeast differs from what you're going to find in Mexico. It differs from what you're going to find in the Polynesian Islands, and it differs from what you're going to find in Africa. It differs from what you're going to find in Europe. And if you go to the Northeast, it's going to differ from the Southeast, and it's going to differ from all these other places I just named. And if you go to the Plains area, their foods is going to differ. And if you go to the West Coast, there's going to be some differences. So all these things need to be taken into account. Cornbread, that's Southeastern. All day long. Grits and cornbread, two staples. Corn pone. Pone is a indigenous word. It is a Cape Fear word. It is a Cape Fear Indian word. Pone is actually a family name. It became known as cornbread, pone bread, or corn pone. Grits, hominy, chickahominy. They didn't invent the grits, but you can hear it in their name. People from Florida, Seminoles, or Miccosukee, all the way up, was grinding corn in the traditional ways of the particular tribes. to make different products, including grits, sofki, which is a corn drink when you grind it up, something they do in Florida. I'm not familiar with that particular product here in the Carolinas. So culture. What about experience? The black experience. Well, we can easily say political misrepresentation, miseducation, incarceration, indoctrination. Walking around people of European descent, let's say a group of women, and then they clutch their pocketbooks, make sure it's tucked under their arm real tight, because you might snatch it and run. Walking through a parking lot, and you hear a bunch of clicks, people locking the car doors, because they think you might jack them. Walking around in a department store, and little Susie over there of Irish descent is free to roam the store, while the little black one is being followed around. Why? Think you're gonna take something out of there, you're getting ready to steal. That's the experience. Police brutality. Some term that as DWB, driving while black. There's a difference. I've seen it, and I know a lot of you have. A lot of people of European descent can't seem to grasp that because it's not their experience. Other people of other cultures can't seem to grasp that because it's not their experience. It's a black experience. It's an experience called black. Black is a culture and experience, not a race and not ethnicity, not a nationality. You don't know when you're stopped by a police officer if that encounter is going to end peacefully. Either you're going to accept the consequences for whatever you've done, and if you feel you didn't do anything, then you can get a lawyer and handle that in court, which is the best thing to do. Handle it in court, because police officers are not designed to hold court proceedings in the streets. Take whatever it is, go to court, and have your day there and beat it there, because you won't beat it in the street. What could happen if you try to force the issue in the street is what we see in a lot of these videos, CNN, Fox, all of the media outlets. You're probably going to get killed, or you're probably going to get beat up. Getting beat up is less likely to happen, because if you're alive, then you can testify. You can give a different perspective to what happened. If you're not alive, then they can only hear the police officer's point of view. You're not here to give it. Luckily, we have video today, cams, where when they stop you, it's supposed to be on to protect them and to protect you. So if you're being an ass, trying to challenge the police officer on everything he's doing for the reason why he's stopping you, about your rights, and if you have the wrong officer, that's probably not going to end well. Because I like to put this out there too. Most police officers just want to do their jobs and go home. They don't want to get into a shootout and possibly kill you, or you possibly kill them. They don't want to do that. I don't know any police officers personally, and I know many, who wants to get in their squad car, go patrol, and look for somebody to harass. I don't know many who's waking up to do that, but I do know a few. I do know a few. Now, there's definitely some bad apples in some of the police departments, and right here in the Cape Fear region, right here, the Cape Fear region of North Carolina, in the southeastern part of North Carolina, we've then had two recent situations, one in Wilmington, New Hanover County, and one in Whiteville, Columbus County. Some officers in Wilmington were caught. You can hear the audio. They didn't know they were being recorded. And they were talking about, we need a race war so we can slaughter them, reduce them, get rid of them. I'm just putting this in my own words. But what they were saying was just that bad and worse. Police officers who the public looks at as protection to serve the public. These folks had other intentions. Instead of protecting you, they wish you were dead.
We turn now to this story. Tonight, 3 Wilmington, North Carolina police officers have been fired after a routine audit of a patrol car camera uncovered what authorities describe as extremely racist comments toward African Americans. Here's CBS's Jeff Pegues.
An internal probe by the Wilmington Police Department reveals hate-filled conversations with 3 veteran officers. Officer Kevin Piner is heard telling Corporal Jesse Moore that the protests would soon lead to a civil war, and that he is ready. He goes on to tell Moore that he was going to buy a new assault rifle, and soon we are just going to go out and start slaughtering them expletive N-words. Piner says a civil war is needed to wipe them off the expletive map. That'll put them back about 4 or 5 generations. Later, during a phone call with Piner, Moore refers to a woman he arrested as the N-word and says she needed a bullet in her head right then. Donnie Williams is the department's new police chief. He fired the officers on his first day.
When you talk about killing people and generations of people, that is disturbing.
According to investigators, the officers blame their comments on the stress of today's climate in law enforcement. CBS News has reached out to the police union and the 3 officers for comment. So far, they haven't responded. Jeff Pegues, CBS News, Washington.
That's Wilmington, New Hanover County. What about what happened in Whiteville, which is Columbus County? As recently as a few months ago, the sheriff, and it's national news, Jody Green. So me not calling his name, me saying his name is not doing anything wrong, because it was all over local and national news, calling his name out. The DA even asked, called for his resignation, because the sheriff, which is the highest law enforcement officer, who we all look for in times of need, for him to make unbiased decisions and judgments for the purpose of protecting the people. Well, he just happens to dislike niggers, whoever that is. Well, to him, that's the people who don't look like him, blacks and Indians. Anyone too dark to pass.
So shortly after defeating the county's first black sheriff, this is Columbus County, North Carolina, Sheriff-elect Jody Green, he apparently decided to celebrate. So he took his own phone call and decided to talk about how he's gonna get those black officers, every one of them that works in his department. The audio of this phone call was just released to a local news station, and it's pretty damning. Let's look at some details of what it is that Jody Green had to say about some of his officers. He said, F them black bastards. They think I'm scared, they're stupid. I don't know what else to do with them, so it's just time to clean them out. Man, good job, what a leader this guy is. So these conversations happened with Interim Chief Jason Souls. This is back in February of 2019. Jason Souls came in here because I think it's a bit of an odd situation. I'm curious why Green had this thought process, but let's get to more of what happened. Because at the time, Green was still embroiled in the aftermath of a tight election that's against former Sheriff Lewis Hatcher, who is black, which he won by a margin of only 34 votes. As the winner was still being determined, Jason Souls had been named the interim sheriff. Now, current day, Souls is planning to run against this same Sheriff Green, and he released this audio of that phone call to the local news outlet. So apparently Souls also brought the audio to the governor's office and the attorney general's office as well, but the recordings are now only being looked at by the State Bureau of Investigation for possible obstruction of justice. Again, this is 2019 when he said all this. So back to Green. In these recordings, he can be heard telling the interim sheriff that he hated black Democrats, didn't trust the black detention officer in the sheriff's office, and would fire people who were, quote, guilty by association of supposedly leaking information about him. So during these calls, Green also expressed his suspicions that one of the department's black officers was leaking this unspecified information that he's so worried about to then Sheriff Lewis Hatcher, the black sheriff. He says, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of these black bastards. I'm going to clean house and be done with it. And we'll start from there. There's a snitch in there somewhere telling what we're doing, is what he said on another phone call. He said, and I'm not gonna have it. I'm not gonna have it. Apparently, he's not gonna have it. More on this because Green also disparaged Melvin Campbell, a black sergeant at the sheriff's office who had worked under Green for 30 years at the North Carolina Highway Patrol. He said more. He said, we'll cut the snake's head effing off, period. And Melvin Campbell is as big a snake as Lewis Hatcher ever dared to be. Every black that I know, you need to fire him to start with. He's a snake. So of course, he was looking to make sure he followed through on these promises and these declarations, especially about these black officers in his department. A little bit more. Much of what Green promised to do did come to pass. The two black officers on the county sheriff's command staff were demoted, and one of them was eventually fired. This investigation is continuing ongoing, and Green did respond. There was another point, and I talked about this morning on the watch list, when he said there was nothing racist about what I said. I didn't say anything racist. What's racist? I don't have any actions or thoughts that are racist except for everything that you heard on those phone calls. One more thing about what Green said. He maintained that his former election opponent had been spreading false rumors about him in the aftermath of the 2018 election, and that the conversations heard in the recordings were somehow altered to create a misleading representation of him, because he also accused Souls of being an officer with poor performance who is now trying to run a smear campaign against him weeks ahead of this election in November. Again, the guy that's running against him now is going to release the phone calls, because back in 2019, Green decided to call Souls and divulge all this to him, a fellow white officer, and he's like, he'll keep my secret, won't he? Apparently not.
So the context of what Souls did is actually really important to the story, because Souls did not tape this years ago and then just release it now when he's running for office. He actually then brought it to the authorities. He said in the beginning, of course he wasn't taping, it's just a random call between an interim sheriff and a guy who at the time was leading and was likely to be the next sheriff, right? But Green started saying these crazy things, and Souls like, this is really terrible. I think I got to record a part of this call just so people know this is real, because he's threatening to fire all these black officers, and if he does, well, I mean, that's terrible, right? And so he then takes the tape and gives it to authorities. He gives it to local authorities, and they say, oh yeah, we're on it. So he waits and waits, and then he goes back, we're on it, nothing. He takes it to the FBI, nothing. He takes it to everybody for about 3 years. Then finally says, nobody's doing a goddamn thing about it. He's like, well, damn it, I'm gonna run against him and I'm gonna show everybody the tapes. Now, by the time he shows the tapes, they're like, oh yeah, you're running against him. Okay, but guys, that's not just the frustrating part of the story. It's also super important, because think about all of the agencies that thought, oh, he's gonna fire all the black officers. Oh, and he did fire all the black. He said he was gonna do it. The racist thing where he fires everyone for being black, and then he did do it. He either fired or demoted all of them under his command, and they think that's no big deal. So the local authorities don't do anything, local government doesn't do anything, FBI doesn't do anything. They think that that's normal. That's actually more dispiriting than this one racist sheriff. But do you think that sheriff's gonna treat not only his own employees, that's already a given, right? He already did fire and demote them. You think he's gonna treat the black people in that town fairly when he thinks every black he knows is a snake? You read the quote again. Every black he knows is a snake and they're black bastards. And then he says, and I bet you it's mostly genuine, he goes, I don't know what's racial about that. Because they genuinely think that their 100% racism is so normal that they're saying, wait, but that's not bad, is it? Because racist sounds bad, but that's not bad, it's just being rational. I hate every black person and I fire them because that's what anybody would do, right? No, that's what racists would do.
It was all over the news. N-word, N-word, N-word. How he despised them. How he can't stand them. On and on. So folks, yeah, there's a real problem. That's an experience. So black really does exist amongst a demographic who practice a particular culture and share a particular experience. But it is not a race, it is not a nationality, and it is not an ethnicity. It is being used for that, to keep you in a status that is low. Any person classified as black or African American, you hear, and when these folks are doing well, they have businesses, entrepreneurs, they're in a certain tax bracket, they're not just out thugging around. And you encounter a racist white person, right? Their opinion of you is you're uppity. That, and if you look at certain movies that's racial in nature, Mississippi Burning and, you know, things like that, you're going to hear them use the word uppity to describe people that they call black who's doing well and not just standing and going to be treated any kind of way. Oh, so you're an uppity nigga. That's what they say. Uppity means up. They taught a certain demographic called black to keep your heads down. Don't you look them in the eye. That's called reckless eyeballing. That was a law. You look somebody in the eye if you want to and try to talk to them like you're a man or you're a woman. Lashes on your back at the courthouse. Or worse, you get drugged with a truck or you get lynched. Or they disfigure you some kind of way. Ask Emmett Till. Oh, you can't. They killed him. A child. So these things were used to keep you low because they don't want you to stand up, erect, perpendicular, upright, looking them in the eye, because again, you're not a man, you're not a woman. You're beneath them. In order to be beneath, you have to be low. They're afraid of you standing up and being a real person. They are afraid of that. Now, the definitions in law for white and for black. Black has no status or standing in law. If you ever find yourself in any kind of legal issue and you are using or associated with black as a defining moment for who you are, you have at that point immediately taken yourself out of any type of protections because it has no status and standing. Black is dead. Black as a ethnicity, race, is considered dead. It's the lowest status and standing. White is purity, and it has a superior status and standing. Let me share something else to let you know how your intellect is being played with and how you're being manipulated. Why is someone from India the darkest of the dark? May have straight hair and may have some angular facial features. Some, not all. Why are all of these folks? Why is their race white? Yes, it is. It's white. Okay, what about Africans? Why are some northeastern Africans classified as white? I'll show you a video on that right now, so don't take my word from it. Listen to somebody from Africa who was upset that he was being classified as white. I'll show that video in a minute. I'll show you a clip. Why are Mexicans on their birth certificates written as white? Why are all these melanated people around the world classified as white people? You know what that does? That raises the population of white up. And it reduces the other populations to a number well below white, because everyone with certain Indo-European features are being reclassified as white when they can be as black as coal. I've seen people from India, the darkest I've ever seen. Actually, I've seen some African and Indian people from India who are so dark that I couldn't help but stare in amazement that there's actually people walking around that has such melanin-rich skin like that. And when I look at it, I don't look at it as being ugly, and I don't look at it as being anything derogatory. They're humans just like I am. And I respect them like I expect for them to respect me and for who I am. I am an indigenous American from Onawayunka. I'm Oklahoma. My nation is Skorure, Woka. The Cape Fear Band of Skorure and Wokan Indians is who we are known as today. We're treaty holders with the people who came here before the founding of the United States government. We fought in the wars, the Indian Wars, we fought in the Revolutionary War, and we fought in the Civil War. We fought in all the wars. And even after that, our families have joined militaries and have taken part in all the different United States campaigns across the world. That there's pyramids all around the world. There's ancient structures all around the world. The pyramids of Giza and some of the pyramids here in the United States, they are all pointing astrologically to the same points in the universe, in space. How is that possible? That's because at a certain time, humanity was connected. Right now, humanity is divided. And the portion of humanity located in Turtle Island in the United States, and especially east of the Mississippi, but not exclusively east of the Mississippi, we have been targeted, and we're not even supposed to exist anymore. And everybody wants to take shots, whether it's the people here that we live amongst or other countries. Everyone wants to tell us who we are. You can accept it if you want, or you can assert yourself of who you are. Now, for you folks out here who do not believe that we have been fractured into a million pieces, and these million pieces have forgotten, they've forgotten who they were before they were fractured. So bringing these pieces back, let's say these pieces are pieces of a puzzle. When you put these puzzles back together, these puzzle pieces back together, you will have a beautiful picture. Let's say of a lake surrounded by lush green forests and flowers. That's the picture. Break that puzzle apart, and let's say it's a 3,000 piece puzzle, and these pieces are all over the place. You know how hard it is to put that puzzle back together, especially when it's been purposely broken up? How can, and here's something that people ask. If you are indigenous, if you're an Indian, and American Indian or whatever, how is it you don't know? Why is it there's so much about that you don't know? How can that be possible? Because if you were, you would know something more than what you know now. You don't know anything. And you're only finding out through DNA. I'm just saying this. I've been hearing this from different places. Also, y'all taking DNA tests and now you're an Indian. Or now you did this and that and now you're Indian. You know, I can't speak to a lot of places, but I can definitely speak of my area with authority. Just so happens, what has taken place here has taken place up and down the East Coast and throughout the country. So when I speak about my place, I'm actually talking about your areas too, indirectly. If your family has been fractured to the point where you may have an uncle and that uncle's really your father, but you don't know that. Or you have a cousin who's really your uncle. Or a family name, when you go back to a certain timeline in history, that name changed to something else. And the only way you'll know that is if you go in that particular family back to a specific time when that name changed. Or if your grandmother wasn't born in a hospital but was born in a house and her mother died. So she was raised by her sister who's 20 years older than her. And her sister became a mother. Or your grandmother had sexual relations with a young man 7 years or 8 years, maybe 10 years younger than her. Let's say the young man is still a teenager and she's an adult. Well, back in 1800s, early 1900s, a woman wouldn't be looked on favorably for being in some type of relationship like that. She'd be looked at as being loose, or a whore, or a Jezebel. You know how You know how our religious communities like to gossip and talk and backbite about people? See, when you start crossing over and say, okay, this is my ancestry, I want to reclaim my ancestral bloodline. That means you're choosing to leave a culture of gossip and backbiting, which if you've gone to churches, Baptist church and so forth, you've seen people in there gossiping, sitting back talking about other women in there, talking about other women wearing something about their hats. Oh, she thinks she looks good with that hat on. That hat's too big. Look at that dress. Look how she's walking. You heard it. I've heard it. I know people in the community that used to gossip all the time. My parents sometimes didn't like to go to church because, my mom, my dad wasn't a church goer. He would listen to some gospel and play his guitar in the privacy of his own home because he didn't like being around folks like that. And my mom, she would go because it was mostly her family members. But she really didn't like being around all that. It was just too much gossip. And you know what? When you can ride around a neighborhood and you see about 5 churches on 3 blocks, that means there's a lot of disagreeable people. Somebody done got mad and then went to down the street and built the church on a different block, on another block. You can ride around communities and see multiple churches. That's because you have a lot of disagreeable people. People get pissed off, leave one church, go to another. If you can't go to another one, you build one. You'll become a pastor. Recruit the people for your church. That's that experience I was talking about. So if you can have a grandmother who was raised by her sister, and she knew her sister as her mother because her mother died at childbirth, or a cousin who's really your uncle, and an uncle who's really your father, and a father who's not your biological father but your stepfather. I mean, it's all kinds of scenarios. If we can have those type of situations arise in our families and we not even know, and we grow up because of these things 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years down the road from your parents, great-parents, and great-great-grandparents to you today, that's enough time for you to lose contact and touch with people you're closely related to. How's that possible? How's it possible for me not to know close family, as close as first, second, and third cousins, living only 5, 10, and 15 minutes away, not know that they're actually my blood family? But we all go to school together and we only associate with each other as friends. We're on the basketball team together. We play football together. With some, we may hang out. We may hang out together, but we're just friends. This has happened to my dad, it has happened to my mother, it has happened to my granddad, and it has happened to me. It's not happening to my children because I know and I taught them. So the generational curse stops with me. I'm bringing all this up to say, if you can be living next door to a first or second cousin or an uncle, and you not even know it, you think it's a friend. If you can forget something like that, then of course, over hundreds of years, you can forget things pertaining to you being indigenous or your tribe or anything associated with that. Same thing. The same things that cause your families to split up and for you to gain a type of amnesia towards who your family is, that same thing could be applied to you also forgetting any and sometimes all things pertaining to your indigenous side of your ancestry, not knowing anything about it. Just like you didn't know that was your cousin next door or your uncle. And to address another issue, a lot of you who have been going by the misnomers African American, some of you may actually be African American with very little to no indigenous ancestry. So please, you need to stop making blanket statements about people you don't know and automatically assuming that they are an Aboriginal, indigenous, and so forth, unless you know the people. Now, I would say that the pattern, there's a pattern that's been constant, that many people of African American classification has been able to prove a significant amount of indigenous ancestry. Some have been able to prove that to be the primary ancestry with admixtures. Some have not been able to prove that at all. So I never go out and I this is me personally, this is just how I think and what I do. I don't make blanket statements and just automatically include the whole population as a thing. I don't do that. I don't know the whole population to do that. I know my family, I know the people that I've gotten to know in different places, but I don't know everybody. So how can I attest to who you are, what you are, without actually knowing you, knowing your family, knowing your area, knowing your county, knowing your community, state, region, any of that? I can point out the common patterns, but I won't make blanket statements. All right. So, what did this African have to say about Africans being classified as white?
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the US in 1978, and I became a US citizen in 1985. When I became a US resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I am white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention in the beginning to this, because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs, and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I'm Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I work for a white school district. The superintendent is white, all the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And I was told by the director of general education, who is retired now, in '88, I was told by him that I get people angry when I say that I'm black Egyptian. If I just say that I'm Egyptian, I would get along. I have to add that I was denied promotion twice because I chose black classification. This is part of my 2 lawsuits against my employer, which are currently pending, 2 lawsuits.
More Hispanics are identifying themselves as white. That's according to a new census numbers released today. The report estimates 1.2 million of the 35 million Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish Americans changed their race to white in the latest census. Research suggests Hispanics who have experienced discrimination are less likely to identify as white.
I mean, it goes back to all the way back to the United States invasion of Mexico, because Mexico was colonized twice, first by Spain and then by the United States. And when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which then the U.S. stole half of what the United States is used to be part of Mexico, and as part of the treaty, Mexicans who were now living in that territory were given U.S. citizenship. But at that time, in the Congress, there were laws that said that only free white people could be citizens. So here comes Mexicans who are not white, who most of them were not white. I mean, there were some Mexicans that were, Spaniards that were born in Mexico and they were now called Mexicans, who were white. But the majority of the people who were quote unquote acquired in that territory were labeled white. And that, when I go back to it, I'm like, that created such a host of issues because unos se las creyeron. Unos se la creyeron, los que no se la creyeron continually have sought whiteness as a way to advance, as a way of economic mobility, as a way to protect themselves from racism and discrimination. It has never worked out to try to veil ourselves under whiteness. But that's partly where it comes from, is all the way back to then, all the way back to Mexicans being an unwanted bounty of war, because the way that the border was drawn and the land that the United States acquired or stole from Mexico was specifically drawn so that they would get the most amount of land with the least amount of Mexicans, because they viewed those Mexicans as a problem.
I'd like to thank Mohammed and the staff here at the Library of Congress, the Africa and Middle East Division, for their kindness in inviting me and welcoming me to this lecture series. I'd also like to thank the Arab American National Museum and Helen Samhan for the images that you will see in this PowerPoint. This piece is a work in progress, so I hope, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer session. The classification of Middle Easterners and North Africans in the U.S. as white by race stretches back over a century ago.